Ladies and gentlemen, because we believe in keeping time, we are not going to punish those who have come early by waiting for those who will come late. Um, Allow me to change the presentations somewhat. The main speaker for this evening is actually Professor Timothy Kiruhi. Is not me. It's Professor Tim who is going to be the main speaker. I'll only add a little something from what he has taught us. Professor Tim Kiruhi is the current Vice Chancellor of the International Leadership University. He's a certified transforming leadership coach with ILF, and he has coached over 15 leaders who have gone on to coach others. He has a BSc in mechanical engineering from the University of Nairobi, where he got a first class honors. He has an MA in organizational leadership and global leadership. And he has a PhD from Regent University. He has published many academic papers, including a chapter in a book called Leading an African Renaissance, which is an academic book. He has sat on 7 boards of non-profit and for-profit firms, in which he was chairing 3 of those boards. He was the CEO of Ethical Leadership Network from 2008 to 2018. And he has just completed a stint as the chair of the Tharaka University, which he has held for the last 6 years. He's a leadership trainer, mentor, and a coach. So we welcome, help me in welcoming Professor Kiruhi. You can give us some reactions as he addresses these most important issues. Karibu sana, Prof.
Thank you so much, Dr. Homengari, and good evening to the colleagues who are here. I can identify quite a number who are known to me, but also a number of other new friends that I hope to make today. I want to thank KCPF and first congratulate you on the 15 years of continuous service to this country. It is not easy to do that, having been in ministry also, for a period of time. I'm aware that there are many challenges, and again, 15 means that you are now adolescent. So there are also challenges that come with age and and experience as the organization continues to metamorphose and grow. Allow me to just to use a short presentation, but first of all, maybe start with a question. I believe we are in a nation that is in a sense of a moral crisis, and there are many facets to that. But maybe the most familiar and the most common is that we are a nation that has unfortunately bowed to the god of money. Money is everything. So we'll do for anything for money. I mean, unfortunately, this week we are talking about the lawyer who was shot dead, and there are many others who have been shot in similar circumstances. We don't know, of course, the motive. We can only speculate. But from what the Standard was trying to show today, it could be that there are a lot of business issues around that issue. Unfortunately, even those of us in the faith have not been spared. People are willing to sell their consciences, their souls, for money, and so on. And you could talk about other moral crises. This is only one of them that we find ourselves in. So I think then the topic then is very fitting when we ask, what role can the church play as a moral compass? Of course, aware that we ourselves are challenged in various ways. I would like to bring greetings from my colleagues at ILU, the International Leadership University. Time allowing, I'll tell you just a little bit about ILU at the end. But allow me to get into this topic, which is an area of passion for me, both from my work in academia, but also just as a Christian, and my area of contribution. So as we talk about getting involved in society and being the moral conscience, the moral compass of society, the first thing is to ask, is there room for that? Because there are many believers who, of course, are very cautious when you begin to talk about government, governance. There's a lot of caution. Is there a biblical basis for governance engagement? I thought it would be important to cover that very briefly, just so that we are rested about this topic as we discuss it. And I'm sure we could feel free to use a chat because that may be the easiest means for us to communicate. So, what are some examples that you can think of believers who, in their season, were able to engage the government of the day or in governance issues of the day in their context? I'm sure there are many, and I just thought that would be an important area to begin. What are some of them? You can use the chat so that we all have an equal chance to share something. And I'm looking at my chat to see some of the contributions. I hope it's okay. Those of you who may be in transit, we do understand, but so don't cause an accident. But those of you who may be sitting at home and comfortable then or in another place, then please do feel free to use the chat. What are some of the role models that encourage you? Okay, let's kind of engage. I hope you don't mind. I'm a teacher, so I'd like to engage the audience so that we are able to work together through this. Just the names. You don't have to give a description. Who are some of the leaders, men and women whom God used in their season? That can be an encouragement to us, a role model for us. Yes, I can see some of us. Okay, Bishop Muge, more of a contemporary example. Thank you. Okay. All right. So the whole books, 6 books here listed by Anthony. Thank you. First and Second Kings, First and Second Chronicles, First and Second Samuel. So you can think of David, Josiah, Joash, and others. Daniel from Patrice. Thank you. And there are others. These are only a few. For Medacheg, Nathan. Yeah, Nathan had a significant involvement there. Pastor Matthew has shared there about Bishop Emeritus Silas Diego, who was able to get engaged. So we have both contemporary moral models, but also biblical examples. Jesus himself, our very Lord, also spoke to truth to power, in his day. Moses and David. And I'm sure there are a number of ladies as well. We haven't been very fair on the fair agenda, but I'm sure they are there, whether Deborah or others that were involved in their day. So these are some of the same ones. The prophets, and the Bible talks about us as being watchmen, and women therefore shepherds. John the Baptist, paid the ultimate price. Maybe we didn't mention him, of losing his own life, his head, because of speaking truth to power. And of course, Jesus is the ultimate one. Paul before Festus and other authorities. And there are many others. So we just wanted to draw the basis that it is biblical. And I think that should allow us to do that. But then what are some of the spaces we can get involved in? We'll come back to the moral part. But what are the broader areas of involvement in governance that we can think of? Well, I'll maybe engage us here a bit, and then you feel free to add others on the chat, but I'll go through a few here that I had prepared. So the Bible tells us that pastors' role is to train or empower God's people to use their gifts in service. So really Sundays are refueling. If you could use an example of a car for us to run through the whole week, Monday to Saturday, really disseminating the gospel and its principles and values in society, in every sector. The whole question of being marketplace, witnesses and ambassadors for Christ, and so on. So we know that we are equipped to be able to do that. Of course, there are believers who also excelled even in government itself, not just being close to government. Joseph, hey, we didn't talk about Esther, of course, as somebody who was also able to engage the king in her days. Nehemiah, Daniel, and others. And these are believers, but they not only served from the outside, speaking to government, they actually went into government and excelled in their day, even though there was corruption and all other kinds of things, the worship of idols, like we talked about ours, and they were able to withstand that. So what are some governance roles that Kenyan professionals can serve in? Because I thought that's what really would be relevant to us. Because sometimes we don't engage because maybe we are not aware that there are roles that we can play. What are some of them? Well, let me give you a few and then we can add others. CDF, I remember, hearing from a member of parliament and also and the bursaries, you can add the bursaries as well. In fact, this was more of a county assembly speaker, said whenever they were doing public participation, and there was only one believer, it completely changed that public participation, process. If somebody just stood up and said, "I'm so and so, I'm a believer, I'm a Christian, possibly been, I'm here on behalf of a certain, place of worship," the language of the people would change. There, any deals they were thinking of cutting, and so on, because we know that, of course, whereas CADF is a good vehicle, has served in some ways. Of course, now it's I think been already declared unconstitutional, but we know that also there's a lot of theft and wastage and pilferage and so on. The bursaries, of course, are meant to support the least, endowed among us, so that everyone has an opportunity to go to school. Again, we know there are issues around bursaries, and we almost wish they could be combined and make education at the primary and secondary level free, maybe even up to university. Then LATIF, this is the local authorities transfer fund. So this is to do with the resources, of course, that are being transferred from the old local authorities to the new ones, and how that whole transition. We know that a lot gets lost in between there. Vision 2030, of course, is not nowadays as popular, but it's still the government benchmark. You'll hear about the medium term and all the various ways that government plans. It's really still based around that. And of course, now the bitter one for this current administration. Elective positions. We'll come to those in a moment. Those are the trickier ones, of course, for believers. Public participation. Again, a lot of things go wrong because we are not able to engage, whether it's a budget for the counties or the things that require new laws that require just and voice. And we know that, of course, that sometimes the politicians have perfected ways of evading the real participants by importing people to come and participate there and so on. But I know in some communities, if church leaders from across different denominations came together and they just spoke and said, we cannot allow this to happen here, and so on, most likely they'll be respected. Of course, if they're working together, not one, but many coming together and so on, whistleblowing. And public service boards, these boards are the ones that employ the workers for our counties. And again, we all know what happens there, or even the Public Service Commission for that matter. Parastatal boards, like what has been mentioned, I've been leading one, and if time allows, I can tell you a little bit about how I got involved with Haraka University, and before that, the University of Nairobi, and so on. But I was a hesitant participant, I must admit. At first, I didn't think of myself as somebody who would get involved in public appointments, but I was challenged and eventually got involved there. The Women and Youth Fund and all of these, there are many, many roles. Many times they need a believer, and just if only one true believer who is who is morally upright gets involved in one of these funds or any of these boards, they would make a big difference. Of course, it is not easy. Having finished 6 years at Haraka University and before that, the University of Nairobi, with all its challenges, I know that it's not easy, but we are most needed there, as believers to be able to make a difference. So these are some, there could be others. And I just wanted to make it very practical and break it down into some areas that we can maybe either volunteer ourselves or encourage fellow believers to offer themselves to be able to participate. Any others that maybe I've not mentioned that you can think of? Let's see the chart if there are others. Okay. All right, so you had mentioned Nesta and then the Gen Zs. Okay, I don't know whether this was in response to this particular one or the earlier one, but the whole question of youth, we'll come to that in a moment. And, and the challenge that we have as a country in terms of the majority youth and their role and the place that they can play in the governance of our country and so on. Things like environmental impact assessment. Yes, the issues of environment. Yeah, thank you. Again, there is NEMA and its boards and so on, and its affiliates, and the questions of sometimes whether it's noise pollution or just dumping of waste, and so on. Things that, of course, would affect the health and well-being of Kenyans in many other places. So just a few thoughts that I thought to add here. It is important to work together. alone, you can be ignored, whether you are a person of good standing or or a pastor for that matter, or a prison professional. But together, the numbers make a big difference, because especially politics is around numbers. So when they notice that a number of people are not happy, especially people whose voice matter, they'll often, rethink the issues and so on. Then be clear on the issues. What is at stake? So that means that you need to be informed. You cannot engage unless you've taken time. So there's a place, and I know that KCPF has done that over the years, where there is a legal matter where the lawyers break it down for us to understand what are the issues. Today, of course, recently the Gen Z used AI to try and break down the finance bill. So being clear on the issues, what are you going to engage in and so on. Then, of course, it's important to come with our hands clean, like the lawyers tell us. And in our context as Christians, holiness and personal integrity, because that makes us acceptable or have a voice, or it can take away our voice. And unfortunately, some of the challenges we have currently, of course, is that we've had, whether it's televangelists who have, been shown not to be, faithful, or make people are using, of course, extreme, doctrines like Shakahola and so on. Those take away something from the voice of the church. It doesn't mean that the church stops. The church has always had struggles throughout the generations. So it doesn't mean that we stop, but just to be aware of that. And of course, to encourage, if there are some pastors among us, utilizing the professionals who are there. It is not possible for the pastor to play all the roles. There are places where professionals will do better, where they have the technical know-how and so on. And that's what I really believe KCPF or LNET, which I've been involved in, or ILU, we seek to support the church in this way, to equip Christian professionals to be able to play their role in society. We can't leave everything to the pastors. And unfortunately, many times when the church is mentioned, we tend to think of the people in collar or in their robes. But that's a very small part of the church. The bigger part of the church is you and I, who may not necessarily be ordained, in that regard, but need to be practicing our faith wherever we go. Now, I just want to show you a quick, this is from an older example from, there's a time I had a meeting with the leaders in Eldoret, and we tried to bring out what are some of the issues, moral issues or governance issues, where believers can get involved. Again, we don't need to go through all of them, but I thought it was interesting to me to look at number 6, intergenerational mentoring. It sounds like it's a new thing with the Gen Z, but it's really been there, and so on. Gender issues, number 8. And again, a biblical view of gender, without, of course, breaking down the family, but, where we can have gender parity or fairness without, of course, losing our families and so on. Negative ethnicity, number 2, again, is an issue we've not been able to get away from as a country even. And of course, true wealth creation and so on. So these are just some of them, and we could go to others. So I thought this evening, I'll give us a practical example. There are many other ways we can get engaged, and I've already kind of shared some of them. Let me see whether there are some others. Appointment in government positions. Yes, thank you, Margaret. You may share that. Lands department. Many of us who have gone there, you struggle and so on, and you just wish there could be a believer, who could stay with their values and so on. Then policy advocacy, human rights and civic education. Those are good areas as well, because again, having a Christian voice in each of these areas. Yes, thank you, Bishop Ingana Vainadu, and being able to also engage as well. So one of the practical ways that I've been involved, and I found it practical for myself, and we've done this both as LNET and I'll share a tool from LNET, is getting involved in the vetting of election candidates. We are all usually disappointed, usually with the results of elections. But the challenge is that we don't usually get involved in the process of, clearing the candidates. You see, the elections in this country are not won just at the ballot, really. Most of the positions are won at the nomination stage or the vetting stage, if we could get involved in that process. Because, depending on the party, if there's a popular party in a certain location or region, that anybody who gets that party's ticket, really already has a clear day to be able to win and so on. So the earlier part, I think, is where we should engage more. But furthermore, even when they are good people, for example, who get into elective positions, the biggest challenge is them staying true to their values. We all know that power corrupts. and of course, absolute power, like they say, corrupts absolutely. And political power, especially, or power in governance circles, tends to be that kind of thing. You suddenly feel different and so on. I've had to work very hard not to think of myself, as a chairman of a council or a chairman of a parastatal board for that matter, and so on, so that you remain who you are. And even when that position goes, I don't feel any different because I've chosen not to be defined by those positions and all the accolades or privileges that come with them and so on. It's not easy. So the need then to keep even those who come to power and then accountable, so because I think that's again where we fail. We are very, very involved in the election stage, but then there's a whole 5 years in between there where we don't get it. So when we get involved in vetting, it gives us a seat in this whole process. So let me describe that a little bit. And again, I'll not go maybe through this, but these are some of the reasons. It's anticipated in the new constitution. We can talk about our Christian role, or what you may call a prophetic role. Politicians, of course, are not likely to do it or keen to do it. Anything that smells of values and so on will have to be brought by a Christian. It's not, and that's why one of the earlier contributions was also the values for Vision 2030 and filtering that content into Chapter 6 of the new Constitution, because other politicians were busy fighting around counties and so on, and we thought this is important for the country. And of course, it has implications for the security, development, and transformation of the nation, because of the kinds of people that we get. What are some sources of vetting criteria, if you are going to be involved in vetting? Well, there's Chapter 6 of the new Constitution. It's about values. Of course, there are a bit many. There are 17. Initially, we proposed 5. But when it went through that whole political process, they became 17, which are too many to remember. But still, we can still use that as a basis. And I remember when we had the Gen Z crisis, and they simply kept telling those in power, just implement Chapter 6. It was very gratifying. Yes, we don't honor it or use it as well as we should, but we all know if we wanted to reset the country, where we would go back to. Then the national anthem, again, is a set of values, a prayer, but also has a lot of values that are embedded there. Justice, be a shield and defender. There be enough for all of us, and so on. So there are many values that are embedded there. Vision 2030, of course, we had also proposed values which are there, which we call moral foundations. The national values and principles of governance, again, is an elaboration from Chapter 6. And so on. Then, of course, there was a summary. We worked on this, CellNet, we worked with other bodies as well. And eventually there was a meeting of about 47 bishops. So we're meeting around other issues around the elections. And so they gave us time to come and share this. And eventually it is from the input that they gave that we were able to summarize a tool that we call BVIP. So it's about, 13 years old now, being from 2012. But I believe it's a very useful tool, and I want to thank Dr. Wahome for championing it. Many times he does better than even maybe myself in the use of this tool and so on. But let me give some examples. First of all, let me define the tool. So the B is for blamelessness and God-fearing. We were trying to summarize, and it's only on 5 points, so you can count them on your fingers, so that it's easy to remember. Now, we didn't use the word integrity. That would be the other maybe rendering of this. But integrity is difficult to define, especially in your mother tongue. I don't know whether you've ever tried to find a common word. That's partly why maybe we are not able to translate it. But blamelessness is very common, and you can think of it actually in your mother tongue, but also it is right in scripture. If you think about the requirements for elders, the Bible says that they should be blameless. Now, blameless is a very above reproach, You cannot think of anything negative about this person. It's a very high standard. And if it's required of a church, how much more with governors who are handling billions, or president and cabinet members and so on, blamelessness and being God-fearing. Why God-fearing? Because when you're in power, nobody can seem to threaten you. You can seem to get away with everything unless you remember that one day you'll give an account to someone above you. And so it's important that the leaders are truly God-fearing. Then empowering, selfless servant leader. So these were different words that we use, but that idea of empowering others. Generally speaking, political power tends to take away from people. That's not the language, of course, they speak in public, but when they're in private, many times, It's taking away. It's looking for, for self-interest and so on. So the need for selflessness and being servant leaders. When you look at these people again, the people that are presenting themselves, have they been empowering others even before this time? If they've not been doing it before, they're not going to do it now when they get into political office. A visionary achiever is necessary because we also have targets to achieve as a country. We want to see growth. I think of South Korea or Singapore, which started out with us. We are nowhere near that. And I believe it's because their leaders were very clear on the vision they had for their countries. We possibly were not as clear, and maybe that explains where we are. An inclusive and just community builder. Inclusiveness is such a big deal. I know it's coming as a recent issue, but for us, the ethnic inclusivity is such a big issue right now. It is still the decisive factor, even in our current politics. Right now is about who is in and who is out, who do we put in, who do we make sure we lock them out, and so on. So inclusiveness and also a just community builder, because justice is around what, everything else stands. If, we can assure the nation of justice, if it doesn't matter which community you come from or your last name, that you'll have a fair opportunity, then Kenyans can relax and issues of ethnicity will not be as important and so on. But also somebody who builds community, that they are able to work with others, they are able to build teams and so on. Then protector of family values and human dignity. Protector of family values and human dignity is important. And I know KCPF again has been very strong in championing this area, but you cannot do for others in public what you are not doing in private. You cannot be a tyrant at home and a saint in public. It just doesn't work. So, what is a person at the core level? How is their family? How is their commitment and so on? In countries like the US, this is usually a very big deal. And if they find that one has, issues there, they will tend not to give you political office and so on. But we have not been very good at vetting, in this area and so on. But also a protector of human dignity. It is not fair that, we've had talk of politicians saying, let's keep this area poor so that the people, when I come to election time, with 100 shillings, 200 shillings, I'll be able to influence the voting patterns. It is not fair that, after 5 years, 15 years in a political office, your constituency still remains backward and so on, and things that justify human dignity. So they need to do that. So anyway, so BIP, blamelessness, empowering, visionary, inclusive, and protector of family values and human dignity. So that's a tool. So how have we used this? I'll not go into the details. I'll share this presentation later. It goes through, and so this is one, so just to show that we have had a chance to work together. Now, I could not remember the year here, but we worked together on a conference we called Wajibika. You can see KCPF was a partner there, LNet, NCCK, World Vision, EAK, and there were others possibly. But those were the main organizers where we brought people together, and the whole idea was to empower people. So again, we can train people. This is one of the things we could also do, so that people then are more conscientized about this and they are empowered. They know what to do, and so on. And so that's just an example. So let me give you a quick example. I have shared this maybe elsewhere. So this breaks down the blamelessness a bit more in terms of issues of character. Empowering is a competent leader. I'll not take time to go through this. A visionary leader is somebody with a compelling vision. They need to have clarity on what the constituency, if it's an MP or county or the nation, needs to become, and of course, be able to show a track record. Where have they done that before? Then a conciliatory leader. Again, what has been their track record in this area? Have they brought people together, or have they been a divisive leader? And so on. So they're not just suddenly going to become inclusive if they've been always been causing divisions and so on. And then a protector of family values, a caring leader, and so on. So let me give just some examples here. This is, maybe just, in the last two elections, I think it's been, yes, the 2022 and the 2017 elections. I think it's when I've been, I kind of woke up, and very briefly just wanted to mention that I felt, I must be able to influence something, at least at the lowest level, which is the MCA, in our Kenyan context in terms of the elected leaders. I may not be able to have as much influence. I can have some, And there are some other things we've done at other levels. I remember there's a time we hosted a senatorial debate for the Nairobi County, I think for the 2017 elections. And, we were able to do that. That was an effort by LNet just to bring together, again, the candidates, and we questioned them based on values. You are the ones who put forth the questions. And we're surprised, actually, NTV partnered with us and aired it live. So again, there, you just start somewhere and God takes over, as you make yourself available. So those are some other places, again, if we could be in the places where we're influencing that. But anyway, at the local level, I thought, where do I get the candidates? Where do I get to know where they are? And, lo and behold, I thought, let me just ask the border riders. Maybe they tend to know what's going on in the community. And some of you may have heard me share that actually one border rider I remember gave me 16 names. To me, that's the work we do every day. We are campaigning for these people. So just in one quick shot, I was able to get 16 names of candidates for the MCA position for the ward where I live. And so I thought, okay, let me write a text message, just a simple text message to them to say, I'm part of this neighborhood. We have 200 homes. We estimate somewhere at least between, if you assume that every house has an average of maybe 3 people, maybe that's 600 up to upwards of, maybe somewhere up to 600 people who may be eligible to vote, if you assume that there's at least one adult, or 400 to 600, voters and so on. And I would like to get to know you better as a candidate, and so that people can decide whether to vote for you or not. Now, for an MCA, that do 500 votes matter? Of course. Many MCA positions, they win by very, very small margins. So when you are talking about 400 to 600, it's a big number. That was the last time I needed to announce this. From there on, it was them chasing me. Ile mkutano bado iko, it's best put in Swahili. And they would keep calling and calling. Their agents were calling. Because of course, especially closer to the elections, people are getting desperate. The numbers are not, seeming to add up and so on. So the day came. It was a Sunday afternoon. I could not even be in church that morning because they kept calling throughout, and so on. And one of them, who had kind of more resources, even brought his PA system. So we had not organized for a PA system. By the way, we had wanted to make the event cashless, so to speak, cash free. So we told everybody just from the neighborhood, we have a neighborhood of about 270 homes. Please come with your own chair. Fortunately, there was a wedding the day before and a tent, so there was our even chairs. So we don't even do that. Now we had a public address system from these MCA candidates. So even those who are in their homes could now be addressed. And basically we had prepared based on the EIP questions. And of course, you don't ask directly, are you a blameless person? No. You ask, of course, a question that was a roundabout that tells you about that. Have you ever, been ostracized by other people because you could not agree to, to share with them, in a plot that where you'd enrich yourself or something like that? And if you ask most Kenyans, they kind of are lost a little bit. So you can tell that person has never been in a place where they had to defend integrity or something like that. Have you ever benefited other people? Asking about being empowering. Tell me one person or a situation where you help people who would never be able to benefit you. Again, most people would be a little lost, So you ask the questions, of course, not in a direct way, and so on. And by the end of the vetting, in both instances, it's been very clear to me who came closest to my values. They may not be perfect, but who comes closest, so that I'm voting with my conscience. I really just feel it's unfair. It's not even right for somebody who says, I trust God, I pray, and when we go to voting, we just vote carelessly. Because, you think about it, before that, I'm guilty, like maybe many of us here, of having voted people just on the basis of party. So I left my conscience and my ability to the party to choose for me. And of course, you know that the party chooses based on money and bribery, all kinds of things, patronage, rather than people who have the same character that you desire. So anyway, so at both times I was able to choose, based on conscience. And therefore, even at the other levels, I've given myself the freedom. I'm not bound by party because I don't know what values the party uses. I look for the best leaders in different parties, wherever they are found, at all the different levels of voting, the 6 elections that we tend to do in our general elections and so on. So again, I'm voting with my conscience because I believe that that's what's important, as a believer, to be able to do that. Anyway, a quick story here. So I remember one of the very first election. The big candidate that I told you about who came with his PA system, of course, was a bit bashful and so on. So eventually that evening he called me and he said, I'm calling to thank you that, for the people who, quite a number of people voted for me in the station near you. So I believe you mobilized them. Well, I couldn't tell him that I had not voted for him because I didn't really feel that he represented my values and so on. So, but nevertheless, you can see it gave me a seat, like I said, in the front seat, now because he's even the one calling me back, and so on. And I found out that every time that I've tried to call him, that MCA, and even now the second MCA, who is the current one, they always respond. Recently, we had a situation in our estate where they had, APSC had cut off power from one part of the estate for 2 days. There was a patient who needed to kind of to be on oxygen. Of course, it was a crisis. And I called him, and he didn't pick immediately, but he called back. And you can see that, many times, of course, for many of us, if you try to call you a politician, they may not easily pick your call. But I found that allows for engagement. There's a time we also had something else in the estate, and the MCA came with his team because he thinks I'm an influential person who can influence people for or against him. Where did I get that power? Well, I kind of gave it to myself, by taking initiative to get involved in this area of being the moral conscience of my community. So there are many other areas where our values will play in and so on, but maybe I should stop here because of time and not take too much time. So there's some do's and don'ts here. I talk about this very quickly. That, of course, we do this with humility and realism. And one of the best things is, first of all, to vet yourself. I'm also not perfect when I go through the BVIP. So we do it with humility. And then we make values also part of the national conversation. Whatever you can do. So when I have opportunities in the media and other places, I always make values, ethics and values part of the conversation. Then working together as churches in an area. You can imagine one church may be ignored. If all the churches in a certain town or sub-county came together, I can assure you that those churches will determine who becomes the next MCA, maybe even the next MP, and so on. So we have such power. It's only that we tend not to work together. We are usually divided. Some other don'ts there. So to be idealistic, God uses repentant, broken people. So there may not be saints, so to speak, but ordinary people. If they are broken and they are, they recognize their fallibility and so on, and they are God-fearing, maybe that's a good place to start. Then don't tell members whom to vote for. And I think that's one of the mistakes of the church leadership, generally speaking, in the last elections. And that's the role of the Holy Spirit. So my wife and I may vote for different people based on conscience. That's okay. That's not an issue for dispute. Then don't disrespect the electoral candidates when you're doing this process. You will manage the process, yes, because they always want to take charge, but you do it respectfully. So, they need to be treated with respect so that they also, of course, are happy to be part of the process. And even the ones who lost, by the way, there's one who recently called me, who lost in the last elections and asked, can you mentor me in some things, and so on. So, I gave him an opportunity. So again, even those who don't win again, because they often have influence and some of them will rebound in the next election and so on. So there can be an opportunity to prepare them for leadership and so on. In fact, the current MCA, he lost the last election, but he asked me to keep, kind of meeting with him, helping him to think through things and so on. In the next election, he became the MCA. So of course, I kind of have a front seat row with him, just because of the opportunity to work with these leaders and so on. And again, I only focus on values. I don't get involved in their development projects and other things that are very encompassing and where they raise their funds from. I just work around the values because I think that's my specific calling in this regard. The others are important, and there are times I'll encourage them or connect them with people and so on. But I leave that to them. So again, we talked about this. So uniting the churches in your area, if you can do that, mobilizing the Christian professionals, betting, we've talked about it, then offering yourself and other candidates as well for governance roles. So that's important, yeah. So very briefly, promised you, I'll tell you 5 cents about ILU. So we are a Christian university that seeks to develop leaders of integrity. We believe it is possible, even in this day and age, with all the corruption that we have, to have people of integrity who we believe are best placed to bring about the holistic transformation that we design society. So we have our campus in Kilimani, and currently working on the second, the lower tier is our new campus in Kitengela. We began to work on this structure. We just began the second floor here. Sorry, the ground plus one. Yeah, so the first floor. On this particular campus, we had begun to work on it, and we believe that will be operational there in January, but we'll continue to work through our Kilimani campus. We have many programs from certificate to PhD. These are just some of them. Some are not listed here, but also we work with short courses and community engagement. If there is anything we can do for you, your community, to equip maybe your church, your program, and so on, happy to do that. And we work closely with LNet, and of course we've partnered also with KCPF before, and we are happy to continue to do that in the things that we do. Then the short courses as well over there. So let me just, Dr. Homengari, if I have a minute, I can just tell you a little bit about the last row, and I'll be done.
Sure, Prof.
Thank you. Yeah, so how did I get involved in Tharaka? Because I thought this is important to encourage us. Now, I wasn't keen, as I told you, but there was a vice chancellor of a university who went to one of my friends, somebody that I had mentored some years earlier, and asked him to give suggestions of people who could be good chairs of council. This is back in 2016, when the former CS, Fred Matiang'i, came to the Ministry of Education, was trying to kind of bring some form of reforms, and had removed many maybe of the councils, wanted to bring in kind of fresh hands to work on the various councils of the university. So, so this gentleman tells me, the vice chancellor said, "Oh, give me some names, it's called Don. Don, give me some, Professor Don, give me some names of people who are possible." And so he asked what is the criteria, and he was told, people who have a PhD and also some experience in leadership. Those are the two. So he says, being in education, he had many people that he could think of. And so he listed the names. I mean, he thought of some names, but just before he could give them, the VC says, "Oh, but also, given the challenge we had with a previous council, I would like a person of integrity." And this is a crisis we are in. He says that, unfortunately, I cannot vouch on that last issue for any of the people I had in mind. This is a crisis we are in. We are a Christian country, but we are so short in this space, and this is one of the contributions we can make. Anyway, so he was asked, "You don't even have any other?" He just says, "I just have one other friend. I don't see him in these public spaces, I don't think he would be interested." No, he said, "No, does he meet all the three qualifications?" And he says, "Yes." "So give me that name." So that's how he handed over my name by the way, at this time, I'm not involved in education, directly. I was teaching as an adjunct lecturer happens we have at ILU, but I was not involved in any other matter in education, and I had no plans to do that. So anyway, cut a long story short, the vice chancellor calls me and asks, "Are you interested in applying?" First of all, "Have you seen the adverts?" I had seen the advert, but I had no interest. I told her, no, I'm not even. It's a lady. I told her I'm not interested in applying. She says, "You seem to be so clear about that." I said, "Yes." And I was asked why. I told her, these public offices, they can mess you up. There are all kinds of, people can mess up your name and so on. I'm not really interested. I would rather serve the country in other ways, And I was thinking about my role in LNet and some of the things we had done around Vision 2030 and the national values and so on in the chapter 6 and things like that. She says, if you don't apply, this was on her second call. She called me 3 days later. If you don't apply, many other people will apply, but not for the right motive. How will you feel when you can see a university like ours being brought down on its knees by corruption, yet you had everything it takes to stop? Those are strong words, isn't it? And I'm sharing them because they are to all of us here tonight as we talk about being a moral conscience or compass of our society. And so I told her, well, let me go pray about it, just to be sure, that this is God's leading for me at this point in time, so that should the things I told you about happen to me, those, whether my name is maligned or I have to pay even the ultimate price of death and so on, I'll not come back to you to complain. I will, I'll take it that this is my portion from God, and so on. So there's only 6 days to the deadline. I said, no, don't worry, God can speak in 6 days. So my wife and I prayed very seriously now at this point in time. And I woke up the last day very clear that I should apply. I went for the interviews and I told them simply what I had been doing. I had been involved in promoting ethical business and good governance through the work of Elnet. I've been in ministry all my life, by the way, so that's all I could talk about. And I've been trying to build leaders and empower people to get into leadership and things like that. And for some, I've also done some initiatives back in my home county to try and encourage education. So I could also talk about that. For some strange reason, those are some of the things we are looking for. So although I had applied for a very small university, I was recommended to be the chair of council for the University of Nairobi. I would never have thought about that. It was a tremendous privilege. But the University of Nairobi, as Kenyans, I could not finish my term, with all the turbulence there and all the interest that is around it being a very big institution. So I finished my term. I didn't finish my term, but I served about half the time. It was meant to be a 3-year appointment. I could only serve 1.5. During those 1.5 years, I had 4 reappointments by Dr. Fred Matiang'i. Again, didn't know me, had never met me, but once he thought the values, mix was okay, and it was recommended to him, he kept, protecting me and sending me back whenever the courts would remove me. These people, of course, would use the courts just to try and so on. So anyway, at the end of the time, I felt like I had done what I needed to do. There were some contributions I was able to make even in the midst of all those problems. Things like the foundation that we have today at the University of Nairobi was one of the ideas that I championed at the time, and also mentorship of students, among other things. So at the end of 1.5 years, I was so tired. I was not interested in continuing. And I was just happy to have done what I felt that's all I needed to do for the University of Nairobi. Unknown to me, there was a young Muslim lawyer who was a part of the council at the University of Nairobi. I was a chair. He was a member of the council. He is the one who went to the next years, Ambassador Mina Mohammed, and said, there's somebody you need to reappoint. I had never told him about it. Of course, I would never have discussed that. But, he went ahead and did that. That's how I got to Tharaka University. Again, a bit humbling because it was a small college, 200 students. University of Nairobi was 84,000 students when I was there. And I remember even the PS calling me and asking, are you sure, chairman? That's what they call you, you can take this. And I said, I'm a servant, for this, of God, for this country. I'll do whatever, and so on. Started there. And we had very good support from Chuka University. In 1 year, we grew to 3,000. And so on. It was after that 3,000, after 1 year, that the current university I'm serving in, International Leadership University, was looking for a vice chancellor. I've been teaching there as an OTA member. In fact, I was in support of it because I am involved with the Sponsor Life Ministry. I never thought about going into administration. But anyway, that's how I got into it. But now I could talk about growing a small institution. So God's ways are not man's ways. It felt like a demotion. It is what landed me where I am today. I finished my term there. There we didn't have problems. We had very good support. But at this time around, because I was already at ILU, I decided not to apply again. And I told my colleagues, we've been a good council. Please reapply. I encourage each one of you, but not myself. Unknown to me, the next years, the late Professor George Magoha had observed me at the University of Nairobi. So I'm told when he was given the list of names during the time of reappointment, when I was given the old list, he says, I know this first name. And you know how he used to work. As he said something, nobody would argue with him. So he said, remove everybody else, put this name back. So I remember seeing my name on the Gazette notice and wondering, where did it happen? And when I asked, also, the CS, when he says something, we all comply. So I asked my current council at the ILU, and they said, let's just go with it. We cannot go again as a CS. So that's how come I ended up doing a third term, so to speak, or a second term at Tharaka University. Each of these was not a CS from my community. It was not people that I knew. And God gave me those opportunities. So I knew clearly it was God's opportunities to serve and so on. Very briefly, Tharaka University is a small university. Now it's bigger. Now we are approaching 13,000. And, I say you can see how much I've become a part of it. My term has just ended in the month of August. But it's been the second best performing public university because there's a way they rate the public universities in terms of performance, through the performance contracts. The only university that beats us has been the University of Embu, which is led again by a God-fearing, I'd even go ahead and say born-again man, and who's also been the chair of all the other vice chancellors. Isn't that the impact we should be having as Christians, using our values to influence society wherever God has put us? Recently, we were called, the Raka University was called by the Public Investments Committee at Parliament because they were saying it's been 3 years. We have never seen you here. Every other university comes here. And of course, from what the president said, whenever people go to these committees, usually it's to give money, but we had never been called there because we have no pending bills. We have no issues with ethnicity. We have no audit queries. And we've been that way, and they were asking, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? In Kenya now, even doing the right thing, eventually it ended well, and they promised to go visit the university, the Public Investments Committee. But isn't that what, to the glory of God, we should all be doing where we are so that Christians then can be the light and salt in our society? I need to stop here. Thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been helpful, and maybe Dr. Homengari, feel free to guide the further engagement from here on. Thank you so much.
Wow. Well, thank you very, very much, Prof. That is amazing. Even the testimony that it is possible to do this, I think is very encouraging for all of us. Evans, if you allow me to share a few slides so that we can stitch this together and allow for questions.
Yes, you can go on, Dr. Ari.
After Prof, and I don't want to spoil what he has given us. And what I'm going to speak about is really building up on what he has already spoken about. We have what is called the Governance Accountability Program at KCPF, which I chair. And the main focus is really to give life to Article 1.1 of the Constitution, where sovereignty belongs to the people of Kenya. This changed in 2010. It is no longer the state that tells us what to do, but it has never been brought down to the people for them to be able to engage. Now, there are two sides of the state side, and electing leaders and holding the elected leaders to account is the business of the citizen. That is our work. And the work of the state is to manage the national revenue and deliver public services. Now, both of these arms of government must work, because if one doesn't, then we get into chaos. Now, poor governance is something that we must remember as Christians will come to haunt us at the day of judgment, when our Lord will separate the sheep from the goat. And it is possible that some of us will be told that because we did not take care of the least of his brethren, we shall be sent away from him. I talk about this to emphasize to Christians and to me that avoiding evil is not enough. As a Christian, we must also fight injustice. It is very important we keep this in mind. We can be very good people. We don't steal. We don't do all those things. But when we see injustice, we keep quiet about it. And so long as the list of Christ's brethren are suffering in our own vision, then we will be held to account on the last day. So this was shared in one of the groups, KCPF groups, and I really liked it, that you will not impact the world by faithfully going to church only. You will impact the world by faithfully being the church when you go into the world. And this is what Prof has been telling us, and even giving us personal testimony of how that has worked. And when you look at Romans 13:4, again, we see that the leaders are acting in place of God. They're supposed to be the servants of God, as agents of wrath to punish the wrongdoers. But the most important thing is that they are God's servants. Now, if we are in a country where it is our business to choose the leaders, then we are basically being put in a position where we are choosing the person who is going to represent God as a leader of this country. And that is a tremendous, tremendous responsibility. So electing leaders in a democratic government is a serious spiritual responsibility which we must take seriously, so that every time we do the wrong thing, we end up with a leader who is not adequate, then we have ourselves to blame because it is us who put them in leadership. And we can put a bad leader in leadership by either electing them or not electing them, by not participating in elections, by not taking a voter's card, or by for whatever other means, where we choose leaders based on everything else except their qualities. Now, when we are choosing the treasurer for the funeral committees or wedding committees, we are very clear in our mind at family level. So and so is proposed or proposes themselves to be the treasurer, and we quickly refuse because we know he's tabias, and we reject him, and we quickly say, no, you become chairman, let somebody else become the treasurer. But how more careful should we be when choosing that person who we are going to entrust with the future of our families, with all our national taxes, and with all our natural resources? So if you think about it, we really are not serious about leadership in Kenya, or we haven't taken our role. And if you want to identify the root cause of our problem in this country, all you need to do is you look in the mirror, and there you will find the problem. It is you and I who are the root cause of the problem because of our attitude towards governance. So when we have a poor attitude towards governance, and we as citizens are not engaging in governance, what do we end up with? We end up with leaders who are corrupt, arrogant, they are tyrannical, and they therefore completely ignore us as they choose what to do while in power. And this is a very good example. This man is David Ochieng. He is the MP for Ugenya. And when the president said that parliament is a den of corruption, this was his comment that was public. This president brought the finance bill that was very unpopular, but we passed it for him. He brought the housing levy. We passed it for him. He brought SHA. We sat until 10 p.m. and we passed it for him. What have we not done for him so that he decides to bastardize us? I don't know whether you can feel the pain of this statement. The gentleman has been serving the president with all his heart and even ignoring the people of Kenya and their pain. And now the only reason he's bitter is because he has been called corrupt. This is where we have gotten to. It is us who elected these people to parliament, either because they belong to a party we were supporting, they are our tribe, or because we were voting against somebody else, or simply because we did not nominate the candidate of our choice to be in the ballot paper. Now, Albert Einstein has said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I put it to you, my Christian brethren, that if we go into the 2027 elections the same way, and we vote the same way we have been voting, we actually qualify to be called insane. And I strongly believe that 2027 is the last election that we'll have for a peaceful revolution for this country. If we get it wrong in 2027, we may end up where we were in 2007, 2008. And I say that with a lot of pain. What would a united church or the kingdom of God look like in Kenya? It would be all these people that we call denominations. The Catholic Church, EAK, NCCK, and other bodies that bring together Christian communities. Now, I am a Catholic, and I could get the statistics for the Catholic Church, so I request you allow me to use those statistics. The Catholic Church has now 27 dioceses in the country, with 2 extra ones. The Nairobi Archdiocese alone has about 111 parishes. And these reach about 4,000 small Christian communities. So these are the same ones that are called Bible study groups. They are called fellowships by the other groups of Christians. And this, according to the last census, would reach about 9 million people. So 9 million people registered as Catholics. If you look at all the other people who call themselves or associated themselves with the Christian faith, then you find that 15 million Kenyans identified as Protestants, another 3 million identified as evangelical, another 3 million identified as Christian instituted churches. And there was still another 1.7 million who still identified as Christians but did not fall under any of those larger congregations. And if you take this group together, there were over 40 million Kenyans who were identified as Christians. Now, they may be nominal, they may not be church-going Christians, but they themselves pronounce with their own mouths that they are Christians. So even if half of them are children, then you're still talking about a potential 40 million block of votes. Now, remember in the last election, there were 5 million people who had not registered, did not register as voters, and they were qualified. There were 8 million people who were registered voters who did not vote. And keep that statistic in mind because the presidential election was won by 7.1 million votes. So it is possible for a united Kenyan church acting as the kingdom of God without denominational differences, making a major difference in this country. And in KCPF, we believe it is possible because Christians can be brought to work together. So this is the tool that Prof was talking about. It was developed 2012, 2013. And it is a wonderful tool, but has never been given prominence. And KCPF has borrowed this tool. And when we compared the tool, when we asked Prof where it came from, it was the national values from Article 10 and Chapter 6. When we looked at the preamble of the Constitution and we looked at the national anthem, we again found values that basically can be reduced to the 5 values that Professor told us about. And we are presenting this as a national values tool, so that it is not a Christian tool. It is a tool that can be used by everybody in the country, so long as you believe in the Almighty God of all creation. And we have come up with this as the way you can apply your tool. The scores are 0 to 5 for each of these. And the first person you score is yourself, so that whatever values you're going to use for blamelessness, empowering, visionary achiever, inclusive leader, or protector of family and human dignity are the same values that you're going to use to vet the other candidates. So you just put them in alphabetical order and then give a score of 0 to 1, 0 to 5. So if you're blameless at 0, you're the devil. If you fall, and then you do the same. And whoever gets the highest score would then be the person who you would have found objectively to be the best candidate among whoever it is you're vetting. And if you find you have a good score, similar to your best candidate or even better, those are the people we are saying, like, Professor, if you don't want to go into the position you're vetting for, offer yourself for another position where you can be able to serve this country. We are proposing that we focus on the MCAs and the members of the National Parliament, because these are the most powerful people. These are our representatives in government. And if we have good MCAs and we have good MPs, we can actually contain president. For a long time, we have been cheated to focus on the president and the governor while they are campaigning for their own stooges to go into parliament and into the county assembly to be able to control the funds to their favor. So forget the president, forget the governor. Let's do a good job with the MCA and the members of the National Assembly, National Parliament, and we hold them to account. So this is what the nomination form would look like. And we are saying, if we start now, if we don't get our best candidates onto the ballot, it is a waste of time because you can only choose those who are on the ballot. So let's start now. Do you have a good father, a good mother, a good son, a good grandson, a good granddaughter who you feel can represent us as an MCA or an MP or a senator or a woman rep in your family? If you do, then put their name in a nomination form. Then go to your small Christian community, your Bible group, wherever those, and get one member who is not a family member to propose that person, and they're duly nominated. So the first proposer is the son of whoever that is. The second proposer is a member of the small Christian community who is not a member of that family. And once this person has been nominated, then we go to our churches. And if there are 6 candidates for MCA, we bring them together because these are people we know intimately. And we choose again using the BVIP, and we only nominate one from our church. And then the various churches will do the same, find at least candidates who we can present to political parties and who can then get on the ballot paper. And we have somebody we know from the grassroots. So what we found with the BVIP tool, it is not easy to apply it at national level because we don't know those leaders individually. But if we apply it from the family and the small Christian community or Bible study groups, then we'll be able to choose people who we know intimately. And that is where the vetting should start. Once the candidates have been vetted, it won't matter who then wins the elections. So there would be need to develop KCPA or polling station center chapters because we need to